Welcome to yet another Family Day for Pond. I'm so thrilled to have you here. Privileged to be with you. It's always such a treat and an important day in our annual calendar. We have a packed day. We have a somewhat different day than our usual family days. I know we have a lot of people online and about 180 people registered in person. So I think people are going to be trickling in as the morning progresses. So we partner with our families again to talk about what the family day should look like and what we have learned from previous years. And we had a suggestion to change a little bit the format for this year. So we're trying something new. We have fewer formal talks during the day, but we have a lot of time built, as you can see, in the middle of the day for networking with science stations all around the place, where you can go and actually speak with the scientists and ask questions about the specific projects and the things that are actually of interest to you. So there's going to be more time for one-to-one, two-to-one, three-to-one talking, and a little bit less formal talking. So let's see how that goes. And at the end of the day, please give us feedback as to whether this was preferred over the format from previous years, or whether you would like to see some changes. So with that, I'm going to get us started. Our gratitude to Dr. Steve Scherer and Sick Kids who are hosting us again here in this lovely space. So I'm going to ask him to come up and welcome you all, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anagnostou, and we'll call you Evdokia throughout the day. So this is the agenda for the day. We'll put that up at different points throughout. I wanted to begin by reading the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which Sick Kids operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat and the Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississauga of the Credit River. Today, Toronto is the home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. Sick Kids is committed to working toward new relationships that include First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples, and is grateful for the opportunity to share this land in caring for the children and their families. As I move to the next slide, I just wanted to further acknowledge the group that put this event together today. It's a ton of work. Carla and Elaine and others on the team, thank you so much for putting this together. And then also to further acknowledge the Hospital for Sick Children. Many of you are supporters of the hospital in different ways, and donations to the foundation at the Hospital for Sick Children go into actually supporting this building also. And when we have meetings like this, this is one of the few venues in downtown Toronto that does not charge for that. So your donations are supporting the meeting itself. So thank you also to yourselves. And we're quite excited. It's the 150th birthday of the Hospital for Sick Children. And next Saturday, there's going to be an incredible event down in Nathan Phillips Square. If you don't have plans, in particular if you live downtown, I would highly recommend that you go and bring your families. There's lots of things for kids to do, lots of free food. And there's going to be a balloon, a hot air balloon that goes up and down. It's going to be quite an event and very memorable. And also some what we call very important people will be there at the event. We can't say who, but I think it will be a very worthwhile day. And I wanted to just give you a quick overview. So in this is an image that we developed for a grant that we've just submitted, but you're in the building on the right-hand side. It's called the Peter Gilligan Center for Research and Learning. And then the gray building has PSC on the top. That's the Patient Support Center. That's connected here. This is a brand new building that was just opened about a year or so ago. And then going across the bridge across Elizabeth Street links you to the main hospital. Okay, we're going to have tours of the Genome Sequencing Center. Many of you are enrolled in the Genome Sequencing Project. We only have so many slots open. So if you're interested in going on the tour, you can sign up at where you're registered for the meeting. We're going to take 2 tours of roughly 20 people. Okay, so it's going to be first come, first serve. I know some of you have taken the tours before. You can come again if you want to add your name, but it's really only limited because we can only fit so many people into the center at one time, and also we only have so much time to go. I may also offer some other tours of the new building if we have time throughout the day. So if you're interested in seeing the campus, just come and let me know, and I'd like to meet you too. So anyways, we're really excited to host this event here. It's an important part of our year. And with that, you'll hear more from me later. I wanted to introduce our Master of Ceremony, Peter Welsh. Peter Welsh is a dedicated family leader and research advisor at Holland Bloorview. He and his wife, Linda, have two amazing children, Emily and Gareth. Gareth lives with autism and has participated in many research studies, including the POND study. Peter has been attending the POND family meeting for now over 10 years, and he reminded me earlier about a memorable event on one of the tours where we got stuck in an elevator. Apparently, I seem to have forgotten about that, but I remember now. Peter's been involved in the family engagement and research to ensure that the work scientists do is relevant to the families. This is so important, why we have this day today. In his spare time, he hosts a weekly virtual call for autism dads, attended by fathers from all over North America, with some occasional international visitors. So, Peter, thank you so much for hosting today. Please come to the front. There's Peter.
Thank you very much. And I do strongly recommend the tour. I'll sit it out so somebody else can take my place. And we got trapped on the floor, not in the elevator. Your card wouldn't get us back into the hallway to get out. So a bunch of us got to know each other very well for about 15 minutes until somebody came to rescue us. Next, coming to the podium is Dr. Jordan Atflick, the head of integrated discovery at the Ontario Brain Institute, which I think is sort of one of the sponsors of POND, isn't it? So this is a word from our sponsor. Okay. And provides strategic leadership across the organization. Jordan grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, and moved to Toronto to pursue a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the Leslie Dan Facility of Pharmacy at the University of Toronto. Committed to making scientific knowledge accessible and relevant, he works to translate knowledge for diverse audiences within and beyond the science community. Dr. Atflick.
Thanks, Peter. All right, so I'll just start by saying thank you for the opportunity to provide opening remarks. And if you're not already cheering for the Oilers, there's plenty of space on the bandwagon. So hop on, it's Canada's one last chance. So let's go Oilers. So back to the day. This day really centers around the belief that community needs to be at the heart of everything that's done across the research process, from the earliest questions that we ask to the ways that we share and apply knowledge. Meaningful research is only possible when it's built in partnership with the people that it's meant to serve. And that's what I think makes today so special, and POND actually in general so remarkable. Is over a decade, POND has grown into a true community of researchers, clinicians, individuals, lived experience, and importantly, families. Many of you have been on this journey with us for years. Others are new to the network, but no matter when you joined, your contributions have been fundamental to shaping the science in really, really important ways. So you've not only participated in the research studies, you actually helped design them. You've identified the questions that matter most. You've co-authored papers, written grant applications, and even ensured that the research findings are understandable to everyone like us and actionable. That kind of involvement is actually what makes POND not just a research program, but a model for how research should be done. And it's the vision of research that OBI set out to create. At OBI, we're proud to support programs like POND because we see ourselves not just as a funder, but a funder and partner in impact. We support the work that brings people together to drive real improvements in brain health. And we believe that collaboration at the heart of all of it across research disciplines, sectors, and lived experience is more essential than ever. Especially now as we face the uncertainty around public investment and trust in science and health research, it's clear that we need stronger and more integrated research ecosystems. The challenges we face can't be solved in silos. And that's why we're excited for this opportunity to build deeper connections across all 5 of OBI's research programs. We call them integrated discovery programs, hence maybe that explains what my title is. We have CanBind that focuses on mood disorders, CALM, which focuses on the co-occurrences of mental health across youth mental health, CPNet focused on cerebral palsy, and Transcendent focused on recovery after concussion. Each of these networks, like POND, has built its own vibrant community. And now by working together, we have a chance to amplify our impact, share knowledge, and accelerate solutions across the entire brain health landscape. POND is already showing what's possible. Its clinical trials network, perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, but the first of its kind in Canada, is transforming our understanding and treatment of neurodevelopmental disorders. But what stands out just as much is the deep commitment to community that runs through everything that POND does. So to everyone today, thank you. Thank you for your insight, for your time, your trust, and your ongoing partnership. You're not only part of the research, you're shaping its direction, its relevance, and its impact. So together, we're building something stronger, smarter, and engaged community. This is the vision of OBI and a fundamental to how we believe it will achieve the impacts in brain health. Thank you.
Can we change that? It's got to be creepy. I know it's like having me staring at me. So I don't know. It's a little weird. Next up to the mic will be Dr. Evdokia Anagnostou. She's a Vice President of Research and Director of the Bloorview Research Institute, Senior Clinician Scientist and co-lead of the Autism Research Chair, Canada Research Chair in Translational Therapeutics and Autism Spectrum Disorder, and the inaugural Dr. Stuart D. Sims Chair in Autism. Dr. Anagnostou has dedicated her career to challenging the field of neurodevelopmental disorders to rethink diagnostic categories and focus on underlying biology rather than labels. In her spare time, she enjoys camping and being in nature. I understand that's your camping, isn't it?
Hmm?
You go off yurting?
I don't go yurting, I go real camping.
Real camping?
Yes.
Okay, I'm impressed.
Yurting is not real camping. Kidding, I'm kidding. I'm be happy to yurt also in the middle of the winter. But I still don't see my slides up, Carla. So what do I have to do here? Oh, there we go. Good, we fixed it. They're good? The mic is good, okay. So happy to be back here to just do our usual updates a little bit, but the way that our family advisory and our youth council asked me to think about our updates for this year is to think about updates in the context of how we build community, how we're building knowledge, and how we're thinking about how these things translate into hope for youth and families who experience neurodiverse identities or neurodevelopmental disabilities or wherever on that spectrum everybody sits, and where whatever the needs are, because we know we have quite broad needs within the neurodevelopmental space. So I put my disclosures up, and I actually think this is an important slide when we talk. So we partner with our families. We consider it a real partnership, and we'll talk more about how we partner in FCSACs. But part of partnership means that we understand where everybody comes from. We understand what we bring to the table, and what we bring to the table always comes with assets. Like, we are around the table because we bring assets, but we also bring specific points of view. And specific points of view get influenced by our journey to the table, right? So for me, I'm a physician, I'm a doctor. So I see, when I think about kids with neurodevelopmental conditions, I think the kids that come to clinic. I think the families that come to clinic. There are other perspectives that are important. I am not an expert at all on those perspectives, right? What I bring to the table is the clinical researcher's point of view, right? When families come to the table, they bring their lived experience and the experience that they have with other families. They also bring the expertise they have from the other sectors that they live in, which we try to take advantage of. And when autistic people or people with ADHD come to the table, will sometimes bring very diverse points of view in terms of their lived experience. So that's why it's important that we all disclose what it is that we bring to the table, so that we are true partners, right? We understand both the assets, the skills that we bring, but also the biases that we bring, but are by definition inevitable, right? We can only see the world through our eyes, through our lenses. We try, that's part of community, to understand the world from other people's perspectives, but to pretend that we don't have a bias that is guided by the journey that we've had is not true, right? So this slide says all the places I have received funding. It says that I actually collaborate with industry, and we'll talk about this after, which I bring in as an asset to the table, but different people may have different views. And we also commercialize from time to time stuff that we have developed so that we can get it in the hands of kids and families. It's hard to get stuff in the hands of kids and families if there is no place they can go to get it, right? So that's why commercialization is so important. It's not about creating some for-profit business. Although those things are valuable and many of you do that in your lives, but it is about finding ways that the knowledge gets to the hands of families. And if it stays behind academia walls, it's very hard to actually do that. So these are my disclosures. And so I'm going to get us started now. So I always start with a slide about where we got started. And it's not because I'm lazy and I want to repeat slides every time. It's because our journey is actually very important. It's important for us to know where we started, to figure out where we are and think about where we want to go. So one slide about where we got started. This was more than 10 years ago. You heard from Jordan, we know where he is now, there he is. Ontario Brain Institute has been transformative in this space. And I just want to say a couple of things about this because we can't lose track of who are the people or the agencies, all the structures that actually make it possible to do good work, right? So we have many ways of getting funding and we appreciate all of them. But in more traditional ways of funding, we submit grants that ask one question, maybe two questions, and then we design an experiment that answers that one question or the two questions. And that's how research works most of the time. Certain times, this is the absolutely right thing to do, but sometimes it's not the right thing to do. So in our space, the problem that we have is, first of all, we ask the questions that we think are relevant, but we may be wrong. So we could keep asking questions of no relevance because we're only allowed to ask one or two questions, and then those questions may or may not be the good ones. Secondly, there is a lot of complexity, as we're going to talk about in our space, and trying to reduce everything down to a simple single question with a nice little tiny experiment that goes with it neatly, that answers that question, is not always the best way to move the field forward. So what Ontario Brain Institute did is they put out a call more than 10 years ago for what they call integrated discovery systems that Jordan mentioned. What's an integrated discovery system? It is not a single question. It's creating a pipeline, creating an infrastructure, creating a structure that allows us to ask many questions as we learn, right? So we learn and we keep asking questions without having to go back, and every time we have a new question, we have to write a new grant, right? So we get refunded based on our performance, and we have been lucky twice, but it's not based on a single question being completed. We are allowed to keep asking questions as we go, right? So this has been transformative in our space. And I would say a particularly Canadian thing too. It would be very hard in this environment, and you all know the news right now, to find a similar mechanism, for example, south of the border. So this has been a particularly brilliant Canadian investment. So we're grateful for that. But where did we start? We started, and I need glasses, I'm getting old. Starting thinking about kids, we started thinking only about kids, I'll tell you where we're now, with neurodevelopmental conditions. And these are common, they're prevalent. So more than 10% of kids have identify as having a neurodevelopmental condition. So that for Ontario kind of works out to be something between 300 and 400,000 kids at a time. And by neurodevelopmental conditions, we mean common things like autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, intellectual disability. We have included OCD in there, although it's debatable, but for us it works. But also a variety of rare genetic conditions. And those are the common rare, such as Rett syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, and so on, but also the ultra rare that we're going to talk about later in the day. these are the kids who have the very, very, very rare genetic variants associated with any of these conditions, where we have such a small number around the world, but we can't quite call it a syndrome. We don't understand it. We have to think of other methodologies to be able to provide solutions for them. So what we knew at the time was our ability to predict or change long-term outcome was quite limited. It's still, we're not doing much better, but we're doing a bit better. So although we had all these diagnostic labels, when we saw a 2-year-old and we gave them a diagnosis of autism, or when we saw a 6-year-old and we gave them a diagnosis of ADHD, or when we saw a 10-year-old and we gave a diagnosis of OCD, it was very hard for us to predict what trajectory they're on. So we couldn't give advice to the clinicians, to the families about what to expect, what to invest, how to plan for their child's well-being, and how to get them to a good life in the future. But we also knew that even when we had successful drugs, things like ADHD medications, for example, there's very little evidence that we change the actual trajectory of the developmental trajectory of these kids. So we can do a little bit of symptomatic relief, and that's important, really important. But ultimately, this idea of setting the kids best for a good life, for the idea of living a good life when they're adults, would suggest that we move those trajectories, right, in many different ways, and we can have the debate later. We had limited capabilities. We know the lifetime cost for these conditions is very high. I'm not saying this to talk about kids and money, and that the kids' lives should be counted in money at all. I'm saying this because it has two implications. One is either it feels too big of a problem for the healthcare sector to invest in at all, and we have some conditions in our mix that get almost no healthcare money at all because it feels like too big of an issue, or the opposite happens. There is significant financial investment, but because we're not getting it right, we can't predict, we can't change, right? It feels to the government that no matter how much money we throw to this thing, it doesn't get any better. People are upset no matter what they do, which is also not a good place to be. We want our governments to be able to invest and see the fruits of their labor so they keep making smart decisions. If we get them trapped in a game where they keep increasing the money, but everybody still continues to be upset and we all say that kids are not doing better, the motivation to keep actually investing in the field is going down, right? So understanding this cost problem is important, and figuring out how to change outcomes with the money that gets invested was extremely important. So then, of course, ultimately, as I said, I'm a physician, so I have this bias. So kids come to me for help. Kids do not come to me to talk about the many different ways they see the world. I see the many different ways they see the world. I enjoy it, I appreciate it, but they come to me because they need help. So ultimately my job is to think about how to provide help, right? So we're thinking about if what we've been doing so far has not truly changed trajectories, has not truly changed versions of a good life for kids. We need to think about the development of effective treatments and interventions that actually get tailored to the specific characteristics of a child in front of us. So at the time, the issue that we talked about, for those of you who were around, was this problem of heterogeneity. So many different versions of autism, many different versions of ADHD, of tic disorders, and so on, that was making it very hard for us to think about how we would develop treatments or interventions that actually moved the kids that had that label if we couldn't figure out which version they had. So we did understand pretty early on that in order to renew this hope for families, we had to do things differently. So the way of just giving a diagnostic label and putting them down a particular pathway of a sector, of a healthcare sector, was probably not going to cut it. Okay. One quick question and one quick comment again about because I'm going to go back and forth on this diagnosis issue. I'm going to use terms like precision health, needs-based care. So I want to get back to the idea of why we've been talking about these things and why do diagnoses matter or don't matter sometimes. So why do we use diagnostic labels? Why do you go to the doctor to try to get a diagnosis for your child, right? So we can have a conversation, and I would love people to add things to this list for me. I usually use this list, but typically when you go to the doctor and you're looking for that diagnosis, what we hear people want from this is they need to understand what's going on. They need to understand the nature of the problem. They need to understand how it came about. They need some explanation for what has actually happened. They need to be able to use that information from that diagnosis to identify the needs of their child now, so they can provide service now. But they also want to be able to predict the needs of the child as they are growing up, so that we can develop plans for that child to help them achieve their best life. And they want it to translate to something that you can do for it. They want to make sure that this diagnosis that they spend all this time waiting on a waiting list for is actually going to lead to some recommendations and some solutions that have the potential to change the kid's life. We also use diagnosis to organize how our health system gets organized. So this is where the partnership is very critical, right? We need to be talking about pragmatic, real world things. These are not theoretical scenarios. You have a budget, you have a Ministry of Health. They need to organize a sector. They need to fund something that provides service. And so typically you would hope that if you're waiting forever on a list to get a diagnosis, that diagnosis translates into how that Ministry of Health, with the best intentions and a budget, or the Ministry of Children and Youth, builds a sector that actually meets the needs of the kids who carry that diagnosis, right? Otherwise, why? Like, what are they exactly supposed to do? We are very good at blaming them, but what exactly are they supposed to do if we don't give them a system that actually, if they believe us and fund it, will actually change the outcomes for kids? And of course, there's identity implications. I'll bring this one up. I do not know who's in the room today. Depending on who gets into the room, we have different conversations every time. But for some people, neurodevelopmental differences, that diagnostic labels associated with neurodevelopmental differences come up with identity implications, how they see themselves, how they understand themselves, what they think their community is. And so when we get it wrong, the implications are not trivial for that, right? Like, if we get it wrong, we have basically organized people around a certain identity that may not actually be, I don't want to say it's wrong, because there's no right and wrong in identity, right? But we give them a way to think about themselves that may not actually make a lot of sense, but may sometimes cause problems, right? Okay, so this is the family that I always put up, and I still have consent to put them up. And the reason I put them up is because they are the perfect example of what Pond was trying to do. These are 3 siblings. They have grown up now. So the 2 older ones are adults. Our young lady has a baby, so she's a mommy. The first one has autism, and had a lot of what we call internalizing behavior, so a lot of anxiety and mood disturbance. Has mild intellectual disability, is an adult now, lives on a supported facility and doing very well. The sister had ADHD first. So she was identified as having ADHD when she was young. Then when she got about to 11, 12, she got a diagnosis of OCD. And by the time she got to 16 or 17, she also got a diagnosis of autism. She doesn't present as classically autistic, but has autistic features, as we often see with girls. And as I said, she, in some ways she struggled, but in some ways she has thrived, and now she has a baby and she's a young mother, and doing well. And then the little guy, who's not so little anymore, so remember, the first one had mild intellectual disability. The middle one was in the average range for cognitive abilities. The little one had this like hyper ability, if you like, in certain areas of cognition. You know, this is the one that learned to speak Russian from YouTube when he was 3 without having Russian people in the family and all that kind of stuff, but still had severe externalizing behavior, so irritability, aggression, ADHD symptoms. Mom was black and blue for the longest time. And because of those things, he was never integrated into a proper school system. He has not been appropriately educated so far because other things got in the way, despite his very high cognitive abilities. Now, the other interesting thing about these kids is that 2 out of 3 share the same genetic variant. So the story that we started telling there when we saw families like this was that we have families that have neurodevelopmental phenotypes, but they have a variety of developmental conditions. When they start from the same genetic variant, they may have different expressions when you actually meet them, and different needs, very different needs across those 3. And vice versa. We find kids who have very similar presentations, but seem to have very different underlying biology. So this is how the idea of precision health came about. This idea that we use these diagnostic labels to describe symptoms, but when we have a person in front of us, it's not about necessarily the label they belong to. They have a certain biology. They have a certain profile of strengths and weaknesses. They have certain needs. They also have preferences, cultural preferences, and other personal preferences, family preferences, that actually guide whether this person is having their best life right now, what the trajectory is going to be, and what their version of a good life would be. And if we are committed to that version of a good life, it's that person's trajectory, no matter what labels we put on it, that we need to figure out a way to support. Whether it's biological treatments, whether it's other types of interventions, whether it's rethinking and restructuring how our sector is serving these kids. So with me so far? Okay. So how did we start doing things differently? It's not my usual way of presenting this, but I got challenged by the families to think about it this way, so I appreciate that. So community, and so they asked me to think about community knowledge and hope for this. So community, so we partnered broadly. We developed communities across different spaces. First of all, we partnered across the research groups, and those who were there at the time will remember it was not the most benign original onset to that conversation, to bring together the neurodevelopmental sector, mental health services across institutions, across preferences, to agree that we're going to work together and think together these types of difficulties, problems, differences, however you identify. We're going to agree on a common protocol. We're going to characterize kids the same way. We're going to develop, we're going to invest our funding in ways that actually serves kids across these conditions, but also understands these individual pathways. So we brought together mental health for ADHD and OCD. We brought neurodevelopment for autism and intellectual disability. We brought in genetics. We brought in other physical health disciplines that may have an interest in common symptoms or difficulties that the kids have. So that was the first type of partnership. The second type of partnership was to bring together multiple institutions. So we're privileged to be here at CKids, but there's many other institutions in the province, and many of you who are online or here in person come from those institutions. And we do have the tendency, because of the way the sector is structured, like not because people don't want to collaborate, but because we all compete for the same funds, and we all compete for the same donors, and we all compete for the same grants. We have the tendency to just fight for the institution we're in. And we should fight for the institutions we're in because they're important when we all contribute, right? But the point was to bring all the institutions that do this work, that have the ability to do this work together. We were not able to bring all. I'm not going to pretend. Again, we're partners, and I'm not going to be lying and making things nicer than they are. But we brought together Queen's, Mac, London, and 2 from UFDC Kids and Holland Bloorview, with some satellite sites in the community for some of us, to create this network, this community that goes across the province to try, again, across the province and across disciplines to try to tackle these questions. The third partnership was with international consortia, and I'll show you some of this data in a sec. So we knew that no matter how much we partner, we won't have enough in terms of how many families live in Ontario, how many researchers are in Ontario, how many ideas we have to put on the table. We don't have enough to actually move the needle as much as our families and our youth wants us to move it. So we knew that we have to find partners south of the border, in Europe, in Australia, that start thinking in similar ways to try to find opportunities to bring data together, to bring ideas together, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. Then we partnered with industry. So we're going to talk about this quite a bit, actually, as we go through. I'll keep referencing, but that's a critical partnership, right? So it's one thing to expect our Ontario Brain Institute to fund us, but it's another thing to say, how is that stuff going to get out? And also, if other people have ideas in industry that are aligning with what we're trying to do, it's critical to bring them in the infrastructure that we built with the Ontario Brain Institute money to be able to accelerate what we are learning. So you'll see examples for when we partnered with industry to bring new technologies to measure things, to understand things, right? You'll see examples where large phase 3 clinical trial programs were happening outside of Canada, and we put forward POND as a network to bring trials into Canada, especially in the rare disorder space, but also in the common space. So we have been open about how we think about who are the partners around the table to maximize impact. But honestly, at the end of the day, the most important partnership is that we've had from the beginning with our youth. This room is talking to us, the ghosts of the past. Or good spirits, we're good. Families, children, youth, and advocacy organizations from the beginning of this particular network have been totally critical to how we think about things and what we do with the knowledge that we gain. Again, I will give you some examples, but I need you to think this as a critical relationship. If we lose it, POND will stop being POND. And so you'll see also at the end of the day, we're going to ask for more of you to join, and for more of you to join in different ways. We have a participant advisory council, and you're going to meet them today. They have different roles, and they're going to talk to you about their work. We have a youth council that we are trying to actually repopulate because our youth have grown up over the 10 years. And we have a whole bunch of members to the youth council right now that are adults. So we want more kids to come in and get the kid perspective on the youth council. And we have partnered on initiatives that are led by families. We have partnered on initiatives that families supported the work. You'll see some of examples of this, and I hope it becomes clear to you why this is critical. So community knowledge and hope. So knowledge, what we committed back then was to understand the biology and the individual differences beyond diagnostic labels. Again, we're not dropping diagnostic labels. We're not here to like shatter everything unless we decide at the end that this is the right thing to do. But we are here to understand individual differences and be able to provide therapeutics and ideas and support at an individual level. And for the treatment part, the treatment and intervention and supports, we committed to do both, to both find transdiagnostic targets, so things that could apply to kids no matter what their diagnosis is, but also to find precision targets for intervention. So targets that would be specific to a bunch of kids, no matter what their diagnostic label may be. Okay, so where are we and where are we going? So this is our current articulation of the structure of bonds. So again, we are recruiting kids. I've also been told, Carla can correct me, but that we have part of the audience today. I don't know if it's virtual or in person, but is not part of bonds. So I'm just going to quickly show you this. The rest of you should know this because you went through it. So kids with autism, ADHD, intellectual disability, OCD, rare genetic syndromes come in and get characterized the same way. The same way. We're not having individualized streams of characterization like we used to do before. We are assuming that they're overlapping needs, biologies, phenotypes. Therefore, we characterize all the kids the same way. Now, this is the principle. We're partners. So I'm not going to make it nicer than it is, as we said. So I'm going to tell you where we have had some difficulties. So the kids are coming in across all our sites. They're contributing a sample for genomics. You do a million different questionnaires, and we appreciate it. We know it's very cumbersome, but it's important. We characterize the thinking skills and the language skills of the kids. As many kids as possible get onto the scanner, so we can look at brain structure and brain function. We collect some other samples that over the years have changed, and I'll show you where we are now. And then ultimately, we have a clinical trials network that is supposed to be testing interventions. And we can use characteristics from all of this to actually understand what intervention is good for what child. At least that's our goal, right? We do use a little bit of mouse models, and I'll show you in a second why this is important to us. And we have a large computational core because this has become a computational game. This is all about math now, right? Because there's too many variables, and we are pretty sure we didn't have the right questions. So we are partnering with new methodological approaches to understand what questions are important, what questions are of relevance. We're also linking our data to administrative records in the province. So in this case, ICS. The purpose of this is to understand real world outcomes for the kids that we understand quite a bit about now, because we have collected all this data to understand what predicts real world outcomes and not just things that we measure in a research protocol. Does that make sense? Okay, now, couple of clarifications to this in terms of where we are now. So for those of you who joined a long time ago, there are certain things that we're about to start that you've never been exposed to. The first thing is sleep. So you told us, the families told us on multiple surveys that we did over the years and engagement, that they wanted sleep to get prioritized. So sleep is now in the protocol. We're waiting for final ethics approval. So within the next couple of weeks, that means that new kids will be getting the full sleep platform, and I'll talk about it in a sec. The kids who have already been in the study, when you get called for a longitudinal visit, you're going to be getting your sleep assessed. And we are measuring sleep in 3 different ways. We have a questionnaire that's already part of the protocol, but people tell us about how they think they're sleeping. We will send you home with an actigraphy device, which is a watch, but actually looks at the quality of the sleep while the kids are sleeping for 2 weeks. So we get naturalistic measurement of sleep for kids for about 2 weeks. You're welcome. And we have a new industry partnership with a company that actually OBI supported, developed their technology for measuring sleep. And I know not all of the kids are going to tolerate it, but we want to see how many will. It's a band. It's just a band that you wear on your head while you're sleeping. That has electrodes in it, and we can get sleep architecture information. So not whether you're sleeping or not whether you're moving enough during your sleep or not, but what is the architecture of your sleep? Do you have normal restorative sleep, or do you have different kinds of sleep, right? Even if you're sleeping. So we're putting quite a bit of resources there. The other reason we're putting resources there is because we think sleep signals, we think you're right. Like, we had not started that way, but you've talked to us enough about sleep, and the more we're starting to understand about sleep, we think you're right, that that sleep may be a good stratification marker. It may tell us different subtypes of these conditions because it's just so close to biology, right? It's not something we think about. It's something that automatically happens and very close to our biology. So sleep is one major addition that's going to happen very soon. Second one is gait. We have a little bit of movement assessment. We have a short test that the kids like now have to stay on one foot and then they have to stay on the other foot. Those of you who have been through it know what this looks like. But we are also gonna start a new assessment. It's not gonna be cumbersome for the kids. They're just gonna walk back and forth on a straight line, but we have a camera system that will capture enough detail of that gait, and then with advanced AI methods, we can actually capture characteristics of that gait and see whether there is information there about what subtype of a neurodevelopmental condition you're in. You all have that experience. We have some of our kids who are like superb athletes, and we have some of our kids that are like all over the place with their motor function, like bumping, discoordinated, falling. So we're trying to understand what this means in terms of the subtyping of the neurodevelopmental space. And then the naturalistic measurement of arousal. Some of you have participated. We already had a pilot study with Dr. Azadekuski that looked at arousal regulation. You know, you guys know we actually have a patent now in this area where we developed an algorithm to detect when kids are about to escalate, to give opportunities to either the kids when they have the ability themselves or other adults in their environment to de-escalate them before they actually have a meltdown. So the pilot is completed. We actually have commercialized this, and it's being used in group homes south of the border for adults to help with de-escalation practices. And it is part of Passport here, although, again, I'm gonna be transparent. To get access to it, my understanding is it's not easy, but it is funded. It's a funded thing under Passport here in Ontario. But we are deploying now this to all the kids in Pond to wear it for 2 weeks to understand the natural variation of arousal and understand a little bit more about how to help with emotional dysregulation, which is a common thing that you guys prioritize. The other thing we're doing right now, somebody's gonna tell me where I'm sitting, is the adult protocol. Oh, ain't gonna happen. What time is it? But I was supposed to go until 10:10 or 10, and I started late. I will do questions. I have I'm the boss. I'm the boss. No, this is important because you guys asked me for this. So I need to give you the information. So the adulthood protocol. So we started more than 10 years ago, and we started studying kids. Our mean age at enrollment was 11 years. 11 years plus 10 years gets us to 21. And that was the mean, the average, right? So we had kids much older and kids much younger. So we have close to 1/3 of our protocol right now that has to the sample that was part of POND that has crossed into young adulthood. You have told us that's important. You have told us that what life looks like in young adulthood and what predicts a good life in young adulthood is a critical thing you want us to spend time on. So we listened. Not only we listened, we partnered with our family advisory. So we have Alison here, Alison Chang, who's sitting on our family advisory, and she's a mom of 2 kids, who took it on to understand what a good life or a good quality of life for a young adult with a neurodevelopmental condition could be like. What are the important domains? Then we went back into the literature. We looked at what existing measures are around. None of them quite mapped to what Alison and the pack came up with as the important domains for quality of life. So we have created a new I don't want to call it a new measure because we didn't start from scratch, but we have taken subscales from different measures, and we have a new adult protocol for the people who are at 21 and at 25 to understand, to measure quality of life, to understand the emergence of physical conditions, physical health conditions, and mental health conditions that show up in early adulthood, and then use the information that we have from when the kids were young, from their genes, their brains, their phenotypes, all of that, to predict what predicts kids who do well and what predicts kids who continue to struggle, to again get some ideas about this, not predicting needs right now, but predicting needs in the future. And then I think we have made a new commitment to bringing in more diverse families. I do have to say, and I'll show you in a sec, that we do have diverse families in this cohort. In fact, we are matching census for Ontario, but that's not good enough, right? So it's not about just representing everybody. It's about having enough people from each group that we can understand their unique needs. So if we're just representing, and Ontario is 5% Black, 5% of 4,000 is not a very large number, right? So we need to oversample certain groups into the cohort so that we can start understanding unique needs. And in order to do that, we have made some a little bit controversial decisions. So we no longer have English as an inclusion criterion, working use of English as an inclusion criteria to the protocol. We are using translators to bring families in that don't speak English. People are concerned, and the literature is generally concerned, that when we don't have official translations of measures in people's languages, that we introduce a lot of noise. But we did a bit of homework, and we can't find empirical evidence for that. We all think that, but the evidence is not necessarily there. So we're going to try it out, and we're going to see whether, in fact, using PHIPA compliant, like we do in clinical care, translators, actually increases the noise in our sample and actually affects the data. So we're making that commitment, and then you'll see a couple of initiatives that we have started. More than 4,000 kids now here. These are our numbers right now. So we have 4113 total. About a third is autism, about a third is ADHD, but 20% are OCD and tic disorders, and the other 20% is either rare disorders or a small cohort of typically developing kids. And I put the census data there in red for you to see. We're not doing badly. We are representing, our community is represented in POND, but we do need to oversample. It's not just about representation, because we need to have enough kids in these groups to understand their specific needs. Okay, I'm going to skip because they have already cut me. I was going to give you quick updates on genomics, neuroimaging, and clinical trials. I'm going to skip the genomics because you have a whole genomic section, except to say we have made a commitment. We had made a commitment to actually collect genomic information on all the kids. Now, the reality hits in. Again, we're partners. I'm telling you the good, the bad, and the ugly. We did not have money to sequence all the conditions and all the groups. In fact, we leveraged some money that Dr. Scherer had on the autism side for a lot of whole genome sequencing. We got some money from OBI as extra supplement to try to do some of the other diagnostic groups. But we have almost whole genome sequenced most of autism. We have done a small percent of ADHD and OCD, although we have the samples. So what we have done is we have tried to find other ways to bring in the money to actually whole genome sequence everybody. So this is the Canadian Precision Health Initiative, and you're going to hear more about this in a second. It got announced this year, this fall. The purpose of this initiative is to genotype 100,000 Canadians that represent the diversity of the Canadian population, to start using this as a cohort, as a sample, to understand a variety of conditions and diversity within the Canadian landscape. They put out a call in the fall for networks to apply for this funding to get to 100,000. So we applied and we got it. So we got a large grant, about $12 million. Again, there's a good, bad, and ugly on this one. But the point is, no, there is a good and bad and ugly in the sense that they're giving us half and we have to match the other half. But the point is we got it. And in the principle of that community building, we didn't get it on our own. We partnered, and we partnered as broadly as we could. Let me see what I have together here to give you a sense. So Jordan already spoke about the 4 IDP programs that have been funded through the Ontario Brain Institute. So we partnered with all of them. So you see POND on at the first line, CPNet is the network that actually represents kids with neurodevelopmental conditions that have neuromotor problems, cerebral palsy and related conditions. Transcendent is acquired brain injury. Again, they don't have a neurodevelopmental condition, they have a brain injury, but we are interested for two reasons. One is lots of our kids get injured, and we understand very little about brain injury in the neurodevelopmental population. Also, lots of kids out in the community who have a high propensity for brain injury may have a neurodevelopmental condition that's undiagnosed, ADHD being the perfect example. So kids with ADHD have a higher rate of getting injured because they're impulsive and discoordinated, and a lot of these kids who have the repeated brain injuries actually have undiagnosed neurodevelopmental conditions like ASD. There is also a group of kids who, the vast majority of kids who get a brain injury recover just fine. But there is a group of kids that have this persistent disability after brain injury, and we need to understand that. We are thinking that this may be a genomic condition, that these kids may have genomic disorders, but overlap with our disorders that make them unable to recover from a brain injury. But the other thing that we did is we partnered with the clinical cohorts or other clinical research cohorts outside of our structured cohorts, because we want to influence the healthcare system, right? So a big cohort from Holland, Bloorview, that's transdiagnostic, and this is kids who are just coming for clinical care. They don't have all the dense work that you guys have done and contributed. They are coming for clinical care for a variety of developmental diagnoses. DAGSI is a cohort here at CKids that starts from kids who had a genetic variant identified very close to birth. And now they are being followed up for the emergence of the different developmental diagnoses. We partnered with with a cohort of kids who have eating disorders. We have higher rates of eating disorders in our population. Eating disorders population has higher rates of neurodevelopmental conditions. We have never crossed them to see what we understand and how we predict across the two. So this is CKids and CHIO. And the last one is UHN epilepsy neurogenetics. So we have much higher rates of epilepsy in our population. It's a cohort of kids with, actually young adults now with epileptic encephalopathies. So all of this to say, we have partnered, and we have much more to talk about for genetics in a second. I'm going to skip the imaging slides because I've shown you most of this before to say that we have used the commitment that you guys have done for neuroimaging to understand different versions of brain, irrespectively, again, of the diagnostic label. And we have done this in mice and in humans so that we can start understanding the underlying biology of these different brains. That mice help us understand we can do things to mice that we cannot do to humans, basically. That's what it comes down to. So we introduce human variation, genetic variation associated with our conditions into mice. We understand how those brains cluster, and then we look at the human clusters to understand what's the underlying biology of the different groups. I'm just going to mention this paper, which is new. For the first time in this cohort, we can actually now predict. So remember, we talked about why we're having diagnosis. We want explanatory power. We need to understand what the nature of the problem is. We need to understand current needs, and we need to be able to predict needs. And we are showing, this is a large partnership with international consortia. So you'll see there PONT, but also ABCD, which is a large American typical development consortium, and then Healthy Brains and the Human Connectome Project from outside of our borders. So we partnered to have enough of a sample to see whether we can use our understandings from brain imaging to predict needs. And we have shown so far that we can predict the emergence of significant anxiety and depression. I'm told that I better wrap it up. So we partnered, some of you were involved, to think about lived experience, your priorities from lived experience. You prioritize certain domains as targets for research. Everything we've been doing in intervention has been prioritizing that list as things to measure and things to try to improve. We have done some work to try to think about these biological targets that may be ripe and ready for intervention. And so I will give this one example. I told you already last year that we had finished our Baclof and Canadian study, which was a study that was trying to bring in balance excitation and inhibition in the brain, so how excited our brains are and how activated our brains are. And we had some promising data, but I had also told you that we had partnered again, talking about partnerships with a European consortium to actually, so they ran the same, almost the same protocol. And then we committed to the regulators that we're gonna pool the data. So as of this week, I just came back from Arizona last night, we have the pooled analysis, so the European and the Canadian data together. And I think I'm just gonna show you quickly. I'm gonna skip all of this and get to the actual data. The safety profile looks very good. So you'll see when we pool the European and the Canadian data together, we don't get, I mean, this happened during the pandemic, so I can get into the details if you have questions later, but we get significant improvement in social withdrawal. We get significant improvement in autistic symptoms, and we also get some improvement in daily living skills. This was an autism population, but look at this. Although it was autism, we also are getting significant improvements in ADHD symptoms. We are getting significant improvements in repetitive behaviors in those clusters, which suggests to us this is a nice transdiagnostic target. We have made commitments to take transdiagnostic approaches and look at all kinds of kids with all kinds of variation when we do trials. So the current trial, and go out and speak to the people at the clinical trials booth, is recruiting kids with autism, ADHD, tic disorders, Fragile X, tuberous sclerosis, and 22q deletions to actually improve anxiety. And our next trial is going to be using the animal model data that I showed you in the neuroimaging and the human data to select kids for specific biology. And then we're going to call you and tell you, you're a good candidate for this compound. Would you like to give it a try as part of a clinical trial? Rare disorders trials, we were not part of the Acadia trial, but we consulted heavily with Health Canada to get it approved. First approval ever in Canada for rare syndrome, for Rett syndrome this year. We were part of the Anavex trial. That was an international phase 3 program for Rett syndrome that we brought to Canada. And we have a smaller study starting soon. We're trying to bring a phase 3 program in Phelan-McDermid syndrome. I'll know that within the month. And we are starting to invest in the ultra-rare space with Danielle finishing our first ultra-rare N of 1 trial. We're open to proposals. We'd love to hear people's ideas of what they would like prioritized. I'm gonna say apologies for the PWS. So do we have any Prader-Willi families in the room? I don't see any. If we have any online, this is, again, we're talking about the real stuff. We were trying to bring a phase 3 program into Canada. We brought it into Canada, but unfortunately not to Ontario. Long story, but ethics had an issue that we were not able to get over, nothing to do with the actual compound or the trial, but how they're articulating secondary use. So I actually apologize for this. Like, I take it as a personal failure, but I have not been able to move the REBs in this direction. And it's a fight that I've taken on to actually make sure it doesn't happen again. So precision health is the business we're in. This is our definition of precision health. Proactive and personalized approach to care, where intervention services accommodations are informed by each individual's biology and environment, including genetics, neurobiology, clinical presentation, and our social context, not just biology. Needs-based care sometimes gets put against precision health. This is the idea that we give kids, it's a structured way of giving kids what they need. Both of them come together in POND. We're thinking about individual differences, which is precision. We're thinking about transdiagnostic approaches, which is needs-based care. These are the types of healthcare sectors we are trying to influence. And I will finish with this one, which is family engagement, and I'll come back to it because that's important and shouldn't be the shortest one at the end. So some of you know that our youth council had applied for a grant to develop digital stories to tell their story of mental health trajectory. We got Noah in there, who was leading the youth council at the time. He was one of the PIs. The digital stories have already come out some time ago, and we had talked about them. What's new is developed interprofessional education curriculum to train allied health professionals while they're training on mental health and neurodevelopmental conditions. It has already been picked up by University of Toronto and Western, and it is being administered now as part of standard curriculum. So congratulations to our Youth Council, and thank you so much for the immense amount of work that they did. National surveys being launched in partnership with MOHAC and Dr. Doyle Thomas to understand where different communities find value in research. So when we go and take from you, we leave you with something that you actually care about, and we realize that different communities may value different things in terms of what we leave behind. So we're doing this systematic work. We also partnered with Our Kids Health to do a major campaign in multiple language and cultural groups about why your individual voice matters. The purpose of this being that we want good representation from groups that typically don't have a voice in research to tell us what's important and what it would take for them to feel safe and comfortable contributing. And then, of course, the adult protocol with Alison Chang that I just mentioned, which is basically led by our family advisory and Alison, and will be deployed in the next couple of months. So I'm gonna stop before these guys take my head off. We have lots of time to talk more, and thank you. And I hope you're gonna allow me just a couple of questions. Okay. Yes. So, okay, so this is, there is ethics and there is compliance. And I personally think sometimes our ethical bodies lose track of which one is which. So we have a policy, a national policy called the TCPS2, that is, it's not a regulation, it's a policy that kind of guides principles of how, what the characteristics of the protocol should be and how the REB should actually be giving approval. There is a new clause in the new TCPS2 that says that secondary use of data needs to be optional, so people can opt in or out, although exceptions can be given for specific circumstances. So in clinical trials, when in a rare disorder indication, when data is so precious, there is no sponsor out there that would say that we can start throwing data away. So what the protocols come to us say, do you agree? I mean, people can say yes or no, of course they consent, but basically they say, do you agree to be part of this study? And we're gonna continue to keep the identified data, not identifiable data, to understand the natural history of the condition as we are collecting more data because they are rare and we need to understand more. Well, RRB took a very, very strong position that this was against TCPS2. I can tell you other RRBs would have made different decision. But unfortunately, we were the REB for record for all of Ontario. Alberta has approved it, Quebec has approved it, Ontario did not approve it. So this for me is a battle that I need to take about the balance between how we're thinking about rare disorder space, how we're thinking about learning health systems, where it's not always black and white, right? Data has to move back and forth so we can learn from it to make it possible for us to do the work that we need to do. So I'm actually really sad that this actually happened, both for the families that we had made a commitment to and they had already partnered with us with the foundation and all of that, but also that sometimes our bodies kind of lose sense of what is the right thing to do for checking a box, right? So now they have excluded all the kids from Ontario from a potentially beneficial program because that box could not be checked, right? So it's a battle. Obviously, you can see what my bias is in that debate. Clearly, I disclose it. I think it was the wrong decision. They don't think it was the wrong decision. So it's a battle we have to play. We have to actually fight with families and their family partners in this to help our bodies understand how to advance the wishes of families and youth.
It's really interesting to hear about the assessment and starting to focus in on kids that are now in their mid-20s. We started, our family started 3 years ago. Kids. We have kids that are in late 30s. Is it possible to extend that assessment and analysis? I guess my question behind that is information that provided 35 years still in a bigger umbrella of information.
So if you were part of POND, but you would not have been part of POND 35 years ago because we were not around. So anybody who's in POND, so if the kids came late into POND, right? So if they're POND participants, doesn't matter what age they're now. 21 and 25 are 2 dates where we put for a very specific kind of protocol, but we're going to bring back all the adults to evaluate them. If you were part of the previous genetic study before POND, just come and find me after and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, because we went through Gibraltar.
Yep.
And the experiences that we're having with our even more adult children now would probably be very interesting.
Yeah.
And then help those parents and families, because the challenges don't go away. It's like a series of waves that are hitting you while you're not fighting the waves that are coming towards you. And we're finding that it's mid to late 30s.
I mean, I can close with, so please come and talk to me, but the thing I didn't talk about was what we call leverage grants. So grants that we get other money for to supplement what we do with this. And we actually have an aging cohort now. So we have people from 40 all the way to their 70s. So we're totally hearing you, and just come and talk to me and we figure it out. Apparently I have to stop. No. Oh, online questions. Okay, go.
How do we get involved in a sleep study?
Yeah, so the question about sleep and how do we get access? You get access because you're part of POND. So if you come back for a longitudinal visit, you're going to be offered those things. Because our money has stayed stable, but we have both new kids and longitudinal visits, we can't offer longitudinal to everybody. But our rules are not at all strong, right? Like we prioritize kids who have more data, but if you call your site and you say you're interested in a longitudinal visit, whether they have called you before or not, they will bring you in for a longitudinal visit. So it's part of the longitudinal protocol now. If you come in, you'll be offered both the watch and sleep.
Data on TBI.
Yeah, so data on TBI and ASD, TBI and any neurodevelopmental, so traumatic brain injury, talking about the brain injury issue, and any neurodevelopmental condition, it's not much. We know our kids sometimes have higher incidence of traumatic brain injury. We know that some of them have a bit more difficulty in recovering, but we don't know if it is because people don't know how to measure recovery in our population, or whether they have a particular susceptibility for more of the chronic version of traumatic brain injury. And this is part of the effort to actually bring consortiums together that do neurodevelopment and brain injury to start understanding that overlap.
Last question. University of Louisville researchers have developed a new AI-powered tool that can help doctors diagnose autism at a younger age. What do you think about using AI in the diagnostic and treatment?
So we're using lots of AI across all the neurodevelopmental conditions. Lots of people are selling diagnostic algorithms for AI. I'm not going to say they don't work. I'm going to say they work in very constrained ways. So there is an FDA approved actually now. It's not just a Louisville, like we can actually give you an algorithm right now, but it would only work for our cohort. So there is an FDA approved now algorithm that uses a variety of computerized games to be able to do autism in this case. But it only works up to age of 4. And the minute you hit 5, the algorithm goes wrong. So these things are useful, and it's expensive. So these things are useful, very useful for diagnostic purposes. But the fundamental problem we have is that there are kids who are distinct and these tools work for. And there's lots of kids who have this overlapping diagnosis that we talked about, and these tools are almost useless for them. So I think a healthcare system can think very critically about where to actually meaningfully use them. There are good ways to use these things, they have to do some economics analysis to figure out whether it's worth it, right? So if the accuracy of your AI is as good as a general pediatrician, do you want to pay for the FDA approved system, or do you want to send them to your pediatrician? Like, there's complicated decisions that the healthcare system has to make about these things, but they are useful tools. For treatment, on the other hand, this is what we have invested in. We're using lots of AI to try to understand biologically homogeneous groups that we can match specific treatments to. And this is the future of what we're trying to do. And we can have much more discussion around this during the day. Am I good to go? Okay, so before they kill me, I'm gonna stop, but we are here. You can ask questions all day long, but I think I'm gonna pass it back to Peter.